In this presentation, I want to talk about the appropriate techniques for setting examination questions. The quality of an examination can be judged by the cognitive complexity of the questions. By that we mean, does the examination encompass all the cognitive levels, from remembering to understanding to application to analysis to evaluation and to creation? The question we want to address is, how do you align learning outcomes that appear on your course outline as a lecturer or teacher to the examination questions that you set? Let's look at the step-by-step process of how to align learning outcomes with examination questions. A learning outcome should have three elements: the terminal behavior that is expected of the student after having studied a particular topic. There must be a test condition in the learning outcome, and there must be a performance standard that is required from that learning outcome. Learning is measured in terms of action verbs. These action verbs can be found in Bloom's taxonomy, and they range from the lowest form of learning, such as recall or remembering, to the highest form of learning, which is creating something new. So you should determine the action verbs for each learning outcome that you want to achieve. For example, by the end of the course, students should be able to analyze communication barriers in academic writing. Analyze is the action verb. So when you are teaching your students this particular outcome, you will be teaching them how to analyze. So in the exam, you are going to test them on analysis. So the key verb here is analyze, which is a higher order cognitive skill according to Bloom's taxonomy. When you are designing your examination based on the learning outcomes, come up with a table of specification grid, which is going to show the content area or the topics that you covered in a particular area, and the weighting for each content area, and then classify your content areas according to these cognitive levels. So for example, if you are teaching communication skills and topic number 1 is introduction to communication, you may want to examine your students on the first 2 levels, which is just to remember and to understand. And you can allocate 10% of this to the total examination and just have 2 items there. If the other topic is reading and note-making skills, you may want to allocate 5% and assess the cognitive level of understand and apply. If another topic is technical writing, you may want to assess your students on application, analysis, and creation, such as writing their own manual for use in a particular setting. So the table of specification grid helps you as the lecturer or teacher to break down your content area and allocate specific cognitive tasks for each topic. So you should write examination questions that match the cognitive level. If your learning outcome says the student should be able to analyze communication barriers, an example of weak alignment would sound like this. In the exam, list 3 communication barriers. This does not tally with analysis because listing is at the level of recall. It is too low level for this kind of learning outcome. So to align this better, you may want to use the word analyze. You can also use the word examine. So a learning outcome can be stated, the cognitive level determined, then an examination question can be crafted based on the cognitive level. The test of specification grid ensures that all the learning outcomes that you have included in your course outline are represented, and there is balanced difficulty across all the learning outcomes or examination questions. Questions that you should ask yourself as you align your learning outcomes and your examination questions. Does each exam question map to at least one learning outcome? Does the cognitive demand of the question match the learning outcomes level? Are higher order learning outcomes given enough weight in your final examinations? Are instructions and expectations clear and appropriate? Look at this example. By the end of week 1, a student should be able to evaluate the credibility of academic sources in an essay. Choose the well-aligned question here. A. List 5 academic sources. B. Define an academic source. C. Appraise the reliability of these 3 sources. A question you're probably asking is, if you want to assess more than one skill in a single item, what do you do? The simple answer is split the question into parts. Instead of saying, explain and evaluate the importance of nonverbal communication, split your question into A, explain, B, evaluate. If you leave it as explain and evaluate the importance of nonverbal communication, this is problematic because explain is at the level of understanding, while evaluation is at the level of evaluating, which is a higher cognitive level. So this is unclear if the student is expected to do both or which one carries more weight. So when you split the question into parts, it makes both the expectations and the marking much clearer. I hope as a teacher and a lecturer, you now understand that when you set out to achieve your objectives or learning outcomes for a particular course or topic, you should bear in mind that the action words that are used in the learning outcomes or objectives are the same action words that you must test or examine your students on. To teach students how to analyze a particular issue, and then you examine them on how to create something around that issue, shows misalignment because you taught analysis and not creation. The learning outcome should guide you on what examination question should be developed. I hope this has been helpful.